Presenting to you from these United States of the America. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're watching me. My name is Mordecai Morisa, and let's jump right in. So, yesterday, Dr. Jimmy Spire Sentongo shared a clip on his X platform, formerly Twitter. It was a clip extracted from a conference, the World Philosophy Day conference that was at Makerere University, I believe, and they were celebrating the 30 years of the 1995 Constitution, looking at the gains, the pitfalls, and the prospects. And there was a clip that was played that really showed how Museveni has become a shadow of his, former self. And I want us to look at this clip. I know these are kind of videos that usually don't get the attentions they deserve, but at least for a few that will pay attention, it will really help us understand the workings, the psychology of Museveni. So let's watch this clip and I will respond or react accordingly. Watch here.
Why should people kill one another just because we cannot agree on who occupies a certain office temporarily? Because we are talking of temporary occupation of offices. The only one who is a bit permanent is Sawataka, but all the others all the others are just temporary. 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. Should that really cause a disruption of society just to decide who does something for 5 years?
So Museveni starts saying, why should people kill one another because we cannot agree on who occupies a citizen's office temporarily? Because we are talking about a temporary occupation office. The only one who is a bit permanent is Sabataka. He was referring to the then Sabataka of Buganda, who was going to become Kabaka of Buganda. All the others are just temporary, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. And then he went on to say, should that really cause disruption of the society just to decide who does something for just 5 years? Isn't it funny? I mean, it would be really crazy. Why would subject ourselves to violence if someone is just going to be in office for 5, 10, or even 20 years? Why should we go through violence? But ladies and gentlemen, that Museveni in 1992, if he met Museveni of 2020, 2021, or 2015, I think they would fight. It would be a fist fight between the two. I mean, I'm going to play you a clip here. Museveni was speaking to the folks in Bunyoro, and then he said, Grupu ya Chaguranyi nja kujimaraho. Now, Grupu ya Chaguranyi nja kujimaraho means I will completely dismantle, I will eviscerate, I will annihilate the Bobby Wine group. And when he made those remarks, we have seen a wave of violence, taking hold in Uganda, targeting Bobby Wine and his so-called group. Bobby Wine doesn't have any group. Bobby Wine stands on ideas that attract people to join him in hopes that probably he could lead them to that Uganda he promises them. So when you say, I'm going to destroy Bobby Wine's group, what are you referring to? Are you trying to say, oh, I'm going to fix these problems that he raises, and then that's how you eviscerate his group? So listen to Museveni saying, group ya Chaguranyi tujja kujimaraho.
Ati bambe Chaguranyi n'abasuru abakumusagika. Aina abasuru abakumusagika. Abatakumanya Uganda. Ogo mwana kejanga mbere. Group ya Chaguranyi teroho ninja kujimaraho. You just wait.
And here we are, 2025, group ya Chaguranyi echariwo. The group is still there. You've not been able to destroy it. And I can tell you, they've tried. People have been abducted. Many have been tortured. Many have been disappeared. Others killed. Others are still held incommunicado. Others in prisons on trapped-up charges, to mention but a few. But despite of all that, tactics that you would think are, oh, this now will actually break the resolve, the spirit of these folks. No, they have instead gained more passion towards what they want to see Uganda become. Now, let's go back to Museveni talking about how they've been able to demonstrate that, they do not engage in violence because, you know, that's primitive and backward here.
So in the case of Uganda, I can assure you that, and already we have demonstrated it. We have had elections 3 times since we came from the bush, and there were no problem. There were no incidents. There was no violence. There were some people who tried to bring back the old politics, but they were handled very, very, very nicely, and there was no violence.
I'm going to pause there. He says, in the case of Uganda, we have already demonstrated it. We have had elections 3 times since we came from the bush, and there were no problems, no incidents. There was no violence. There were people who tried to bring back the old politics. He is referring to violence. They were handled very nicely. There was no violence, okay? I agree, and I applaud you for that. If you really did that, I think in 92, I was only just a few months. I was born in November 1992, so I must have been just a few months. So if you did, I wasn't there to see that, but hey, kudos to you. But now we can fast forward to 2020 or 2015 or 2018. I'll show you when there were a motion to amend the constitution to remove the age limit cap. Museveni deployed Special Forces Command. Don't take my word for it. Here is a story from Uganda's NTV.
Following the chaotic scenes inside the Parliament chambers on Tuesday, Speaker Rebecca Kadaga suspended 25 MPs who disobeyed her directive and violated the rules of procedure during the plenary sitting. The MPs had opposed the tabling of a motion by Igara West MP Raphael Majezi, seeking permission to draft a private member's bill to amend Article 102B of the Constitution to remove the 75-year age limit for one to seek election as president. After reading out the names of the suspended members, Kadaga ordered them to immediately vacate the chambers and even get out of the precincts of Parliament. When it appeared that there was a deadlock, security operatives dressed in suits, believed to be from the Allied Special Forces Command that guards the president, stormed the chambers and a fierce fight began. The security operatives carried out the MPs one by one, beginning with the opposition chief whip, Ibrahim Semujunganda, who interestingly was not on the list of the suspended MPs.
That's quite a switch from a man who promised never to engage in violence and now to listen to a story. Security operatives dressed in suits, believed to be from the elite Special Force Command that guards the president, stormed the chambers and a fierce fight began. They carried out members of parliament one by one, beginning with the opposition chief whip, who interestingly wasn't on the list of the suspended members of parliament, Ibrahim Semujunganda. That's the one they were referring to. Funny, isn't it? So Museveni ordered his elite Special Force Command go and brutalize and visit violence onto these folks who are saying we shouldn't amend the constitution. Now, we didn't go through some sort of consultation across the entire country, to see whether, they support that idea. He knew it was a very unpopular idea, a man who had promised us that, the problem of Africa, leaders who overstay in power. Ugandans held on to, those words. They were like, okay, they didn't want Museveni to amend the constitution, but after realizing that, his popularity was really in the gutters, and many members of parliament, if not bribed or coerced or even manipulated, won't buy the idea of amending the constitution to remove the age limit, he resorted to violence. What a switch. He resorted to violence, deploying his Special Force Command to brutalize members of parliament. We became a laughing stock. All those events that happened in the Ugandan parliament were used as clips, especially on comedy shows in the USA. That's Museveni becoming a shadow of his former self. It is really, 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 really heartbreaking. But hey, we continue. Let's listen in to where he talks about what you are when you resort to violence, what defines you. Here we go.
So I would like to emphasize that peaceful transfer of power is part of civilization. The more backward you are politically, the more turbulence you get when you get changes. that means you don't know how to handle civil affairs. So you resort to brute force. We had to use brute force the other time because Obote did not allow us to organize things.
Again, I'll pause it there. He says, I would like to emphasize that peaceful transfer of power is part of civilization. The more backward you are politically, the more turbulence you get when you get changes. That means you don't know how to handle civil affairs, so you resort to brute force. Oh my God. That is Museveni telling you that, if you cannot engage in a civil discourse, you pretty much behave like an animal and you use brute force, violence. Am I allowed now to look at Museveni as an animal who is primitive and backward? Because that's what he uses today. For example, I'll give you an example. There was a time, I think Bobi Wine was in West Nile and he was being sabotaged by security operatives. They ended up beating him up. And Museveni, being the president of Uganda, he had to make a comment about security operatives brutalizing a political candidate, a member of parliament, for that matter. This is what he had to say.
The other day, there was a fracas in West Nile where our young friend Bobby Wine was trying to fight with security people. I think they beat him a bit. And then they came and said, oh, member of parliament was beaten. Where I said, okay, let me study how he was beaten. Now, when I studied, I found the man had been beaten properly in the right way.
Imagine that. Imagine that. This is the president of Uganda making a comment about a political candidate. They beat him. And then they came and said, a member of parliament was beaten. Well, I said, let me study how he was beaten. When I studied, I found the man was beaten properly, in the right way, with a smack and a smack. And then you have folks that usually clap for no reason. They clapped. I know what they do. It's called simping. They want to make him feel good so that he's able to notice them and probably appoint them a presidential advisor, resident district commissioners, to mention but a few, or even give them hard cash. But imagine a president of a country saying, oh, they beat up my political opponent. They beat him properly. Are you kidding me? But he told us, if you're going to resort to violence, that tells us that you're primitive, you're backward, that you cannot engage in a civilized discourse. Is that Museveni who has become? Absolutely. Remember what has been done to NUP supporters, the abductions, the killing, the torture, the abduction of Kakwenza Luchirabashija and beating him up, using pliers to pull off his skin. All this at the watch of Mr. Museveni and his son. Oh, and don't get me started on his son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba. That if Museveni believes that if you resort to violence and brute force, you are not as civilized, then probably you should have a conversation with his son. You all know what he usually tweets on or posts on his X platform, threatening violence and threatening other countries and putting our diplomatic relations with other countries in complete disarray. And Museveni doesn't ever rein in to tell him, hey, you cannot do this. His prides in posting stuff like, I will kill this one, I will chop off a head of so-and-so, is pretty much telling us that, hey, I'm a monster, I'm backward and I'm primitive. And if Museveni truly believed what he said in 1992, shouldn't he be the one to actually say, I don't endorse the candidature of my son, but he wants to be president of Uganda, a shadow of his former self. Now, he went on to say these last few words. Watch.
That we support progress, we support civilization. We believe that Africans are mature people, but they are being misrepresented by a small layer of people whom they have not been able to get rid of. in many of the African countries. But here we have got rid of them. We've got rid of them. That's why you see all these brilliant people who have come up, these commissioners, this one.
NRM supports progress, he says. And then he goes on to say, Africans are mature people, but they are being misrepresented by a few, a small layer of people whom they have not been able to get rid of. Don't you think you are in this layer of people that we've not been able to get rid of? Because you talked about violence and how it amounts to the uncivilized mind and the backwardness and the primitivity. Ain't you now the one that we've actually failed to get rid of? It sounds like it to me. For example, look at the violence we saw in Kawempe by-election, the brutalization of member of parliament, Elias Luimba Lukola, the deployment of thugs dressed with faces covered, Museveni at the helm. We'd never, up to now, we've not had investigations calling these folks in, Actually, one of the ladies, security operatives who was like, hey, you cannot do this violence. Don't beat up people. The last thing we heard, she was abducted and was being kept in a torture dungeon. Was it in Mbuya? A lady who was trying to follow the constitution upon which she swore an oath to keep. She was arrested, abducted. It is really, really, really sad. I looked at that video and I'm like, what's going on? What goes through his mind when he looks at this? And of course, I know if he did, he would now gaslight people, like he usually gaslights people every time they play that clip. Hey, you said you wouldn't go for this long as president. That says, oh, I meant, he went back and amended his words. He says, oh, I meant those folks who stay in power extra constitutionally. And you are the one, fuck. Dude, you've been abducting people and, brutalizing members of parliament and stuff. You are the one. Like, you lose the argument on either, sides, either by, or you've stayed for so long because you've been we've all only had stolen elections in Uganda. So it shows you why we need to unite as Ugandans and vote Museveni out. Because, like he said, not my words, what did he say? Africans are mature people, but they are being misrepresented by a few, a small layer of people whom they have not been able to get rid of. And the other one, as we speak, he's holding his former doctor, his former political commissar, national political commissar, retired Colonel Dr. Chiza Besigye, and so many others that are being kept in prison on no charges. Brother of Internal Affairs Minister Amos Rangomani Turinawe in prison, and so many others. I mean, when we listen to those folks, and Museveni, you saw, Museveni said, admitted after all security agencies denying the abductions of the two Kenyan activists, Nicholas Oyo and Bob Njaji, Museveni came out and said, okay, we've been keeping them in fridge. A nefarious dog whistle to mean we've been torturing them. Imagine that. Then they told us that, at one of the torture dungeons they were kept, there were over 150 Ugandans. False violence, which you say it means the uncivilized mind, the primitivity and the backwardness. That's Museveni for you. Lastly, I think I shouldn't even waste my time. He recently told us that he owns the Indian Ocean. Do we get drunk to power? Museveni is almost, how many years? Is he 85? But he says, that ocean, listen to what he says.
But that ocean belongs to me. Because where is my ocean? I'm entitled to that ocean. In future, we are going to have wars.
Imagine that. That ocean belongs to me. I'm entitled to that ocean. I am entitled. In the future, we are going to have wars. Remember, in 1992, he told us, if you think in that ways, those ways of wars and violence and brute force, what did he say? I'll read you here. I still have these words here. the more backward you are politically, the more turbulence you get when you get changes. That means you don't know how to handle civil affairs, so you resort to brute force. And he's telling us. And imagine how detached from the reality that Museveni actually makes those kind of comments. He's not going to be here in the years he's referring to. He's not even going to be part of those wars. But the selfishness and the disregard, and I'll call it disdain, how he abhors our country. He says, oh, in the future, we're going to have wars. Like, he came through wars and he wants to go out through wars. No, we shouldn't be fighting your wars, Museveni. But hey, let me know what you think. Mordecai Morisa here. I thought that was a very good video to pay attention to, and I'm glad you did. My name is Mordecai Morisa. Let me know what you think. See you again tomorrow.